John and I met in college. My name is Hannah. He was pleasant and humorous and ambitious, and we bonded right away. As soon as we graduated, we were married and began our lives together. I was ecstatic when our daughter Sophie was born. I raised her with all of my love and energy because I wanted to give her the finest possible start in life. I supported establishing limits and fostering discipline. Knowledge is power, I would constantly remind her. Study hard and you'll go far. John, however, approached parenting in a different way. He would buy Sophie sweets, show her off with presents, and allow her to get away with things that I wouldn't. He would reply, "Come on, Hannah, let her be a kid." Though I thought we balanced each other out, it troubled me. It became obvious to Sophie as she got older that she was a daddy's girl. When John got home from work, she would light up, laugh at his jokes, and go to him with all of her troubles. It was all eye rolls and "yes, Mom" in that adolescent tone with me. I would bite my tongue, telling myself that as Sophie grew up, she would get it. She would understand that my severe methods were motivated by love. Sophie, however, stayed solidly on her father's side, even at the age of 17. Though it hurt, I comforted myself with the idea that ultimately, I was being the proper person for her. In spite of these minor annoyances, I felt satisfied. I had fulfilling work at a reputable clinic, a laugh-loving husband, and a kid I loved to pieces, in spite of our differences. I felt that life was lovely. One clear fall day, everything changed. I was washing laundry, the same boring thing I had done a million times over. I touched a piece of paper with my fingertips when I was emptying John's coat pockets. Anticipating a supermarket receipt or a dry cleaning ticket, I took it out. Rather, I discovered myself gazing at a receipt from a high-end fragrance shop. I'd never used the pricey brand of perfume that was listed since it was too sweet and flowery. John understood that I liked my smells more subdued. I stood there with 1,000 options racing through my head while the washing machine hummed softly in the background. Was the present a surprise? But our anniversary was still months away, and my birthday had already passed. Was his mother the reason? She was, however, sensitive to most fragrances. I snapped a picture of the receipt with my phone while holding trembling hands, and then I gently put it back in his pocket. I wanted time to reflect and consider this information without making snap judgments. I looked over John's coat once more that evening while he was taking a shower. The receipt has vanished. I didn't say anything to John or Sophie about my discoveries. I kept it to myself. But now that I had opened my eyes, I was unable to resist taking in everything. It was as though a mist had lifted to expose a foreign world to me. While John had always worked late hours, they seemed different today. He would tell me, "Big project, honey," and give me a cheek kiss as he went. "Don't wait up." I would grin and nod, wondering who exactly he was meeting. I was also drawn to his new hairstyle. He had always been picky about how he looked, but this was younger and more fashionable. He dismissed my compliments with a shrug. Thought I'd try something new. The worst fishing expeditions were on the weekends. He would gather his belongings and go out to see his friends every other Saturday. "The fish are biting a lot these days," he would smile. As I watched him drive off, I used to wonder if he still had a fishing pole. I had not made these connections until I discovered that receipt. They now created an image that I was unable to ignore. It finally dawned on me what I'd been avoiding. John had a mistress. I attempted to brush it off. This was John, my John, the person who surprised me with flowers on Tuesdays at random, the man who held my hand during 20 hours of work. Though I couldn't shake the doubt he wouldn't cheat, I was unable to eat or sleep. I would lie awake at night, wondering whether John was dreaming about her while I listened to his steady breathing. I found myself surfing through Facebook one restless night. I noticed Mike Thompson's name. We had attended high school together, and from what I could recall, he had gone on to work as a private investigator. I messaged him before I could talk myself out of it. The next day, we met in a coffee shop across town. I inhaled deeply and revealed everything, including the receipt and my concerns about John's actions. Mike listened, his expression expressionless. It was Mike who accepted the case. I had a mixture of relief and terror as I watched him go. Answers would come to me soon, but did I truly want them? My life's toughest 3 weeks were those that followed. I went through the motions, assisting Sophie with her homework, grinning at my patients, and striking up a conversation with John over supper. But I was a wreck on the inside. I used to jump every time my phone chimed, assuming Mike had some exciting news. John would always come home late, and I would look for traces of remorse on his face. I would always worry if Sophie knew something that I didn't every time she brought up her dad. "You okay, Mom?" One evening, Sophie noticed me looking at the wall in blank stare. "You seem off." I forced a grin to appear. "Just worn out, my love. Many customers this week." Though she didn't appear persuaded, she dismissed it. I regret lying to her, but there was nothing I could say. "Your dad might be cheating on me, and I've hired someone to spy on him." John made up ground, and the item or person taking up his time didn't appear to notice. A part of me felt relieved, and another part of me was incensed that he could be so blind to my suffering. Tuesday afternoon, the call came through. My phone beeped when I was in between customers. My heart sprang into my throat as soon as Mike's name appeared on the screen. "Hannah, can we meet?" His tone was noncommittal, revealing nothing. We agreed to meet at the same coffee shop in an hour. The rest of my appointments were a blur. I went through the motions, smiling and nodding at my clients while my mind raced. Mike was already there when I arrived, a thick manila envelope on the table in front of him. My stomach dropped at the sight of it. "Hannah," Mike pushed the envelope towards me. "It's all in here, photos, dates, locations." "I'm sorry, Hannah, but your suspicions were right." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. The first photo hit me like a punch to the gut. John, my John, with his arms around a younger woman. They were laughing, looking into each other's eyes with unmistakable affection. "Who is she?" I managed to choke out. "Alicia Benson," Mike replied. "She's 28, works at John's company. She's the director's daughter." I flipped through more photos. John and Alicia at restaurants, walking in the park, boarding a yacht. Each image was a fresh wound. They'd been seeing each other for over a year. Mike continued, "From what I've gathered, it's serious. They've talked about a future together." I nodded numbly, barely registering his words. Then a photo made me gasp. It showed John and Alicia at a cafe, but they weren't alone. Sitting with them, smiling and laughing, was Sophie. "No," I whispered. "It can't be." Mike's voice was gentle. "I'm sorry, Hannah, but Sophie knows about the affair. She's met with them several times. Those weekends she said she was with friends. She was with them on Alicia's yacht. There's more. John and Alicia have been buying Sophie expensive gifts, designer clothes, jewelry. I think they're trying to buy her." Silence. I don't remember the drive home. Thankfully, the house was empty when I arrived. I moved on autopilot, packing a small suitcase with clothes and essentials. I couldn't stay here, couldn't face John or Sophie. I checked into a hotel across town, my mind still reeling. Once in my room, I called my boss at the clinic and took 2 weeks off, unpaid family emergency. I turned off my phone and sank onto the bed. The envelope seemed to mock me from the bedside table. Unable to help myself, I opened it again. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those damning photos. Sophie's smile as she hugged Alicia, John's arm around them both. My anger, which had started as a slow simmer, began to boil over. For years, I'd been the understanding one, the peacemaker, the one who bent over backward to keep everyone happy. Well, I was done with that. My eyes fell on my laptop. Without really thinking, I opened it and logged into my bank account. There it was, Sophie's college fund. I'd been squirreling away money for years, determined to give her the best education possible. It was my way of showing love, even when she pushed me away. Now looking at that balance, all I could think about was how Sophie had betrayed me, how she'd lied to my face, spent time with that woman, accepted her gifts. My daughter, who I'd sacrificed so much for, had stabbed me in the back. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Years ago, before Sophie was born, I dreamed of opening my own cosmetology office. But then life happened, marriage, a baby, mortgage payments. My dream got pushed aside. I stared at the account balance. It was enough to start over, to finally pursue my own dreams instead of everyone else's. You know what? I said out loud to the empty hotel room. Screw it. This money isn't for Sophie anymore. It's for me. The words hung in the air, both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had a future, even if it wasn't the one I'd planned. Emotionally drained, I finally drifted off to sleep, my phone still turned off. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a blissful moment, I forgot everything. Then reality came crashing back. With a deep breath, I turned on my phone. It immediately exploded with notifications, missed calls from John and Sophie, voicemails, text messages asking where I was, if I was okay. Their concern, which once would have melted my heart, now felt like acid in my veins. How dare they pretend to care now? I didn't bother listening to the voicemails or reading the texts. Instead, I got dressed, packed my bag, and checked out of the hotel. It was time to face the music. The drive home felt surreal. Part of me wanted to keep driving, to disappear and start a new life somewhere else. But I squashed that impulse. I needed closure. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw John's car and Sophie's bike. They were both home. Good. I walked in, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. John and Sophie rushed out of the living room, their faces a mix of relief and anxiety. "Hannah, where have you been?" "We've been so worried," John exclaimed, moving to hug me. Sophie chimed in, her voice shrill with concern. "Mom, are you okay?" "Why didn't you answer our calls?" I stepped back, avoiding John's embrace. A cold laugh escaped me, stopping them both in their tracks. Without a word, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I tossed it on the coffee table, photos spilling out. John and Sophie stared at the images, their faces draining of color. There they were in glossy 8x10s, John with Alicia, Sophie with them both. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening. John was the first to recover, his shock morphing into defensive anger. "Hannah, it's not what you think," he started, his voice pleading. "Alicia and I were just friends." "And Sophie," I interjected. "Don't you dare drag Sophie into your lies." I cut him off, my voice ice cold. Sophie jumped in, her eyes wide with fiend innocence. "Mom, please, I can explain. I only met her a few times. I didn't know." I held up a hand, silencing them both. "Save it. I know everything. The yacht trips, the expensive gifts, the dinners. Every lie, every betrayal." They exchanged a look, and I saw the moment they realized their act wasn't working. The mask slipped away, revealing the strangers beneath. John's face hardened, all pretense of remorse vanishing. "Fine," he said coldly. You want the truth. Yes, I'm with Alicia. She's young, beautiful, and rich. She makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in years. His words were like a slap to the face, but I refused to flinch. Instead, I turned to Sophie, waiting for her contribution to this character assassination. She didn't disappoint. Alicia is amazing, Mom, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. She's successful, stylish, fun, not strict and boring like you. I absorbed their words, each one a fresh wound, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I see, I said, my voice steady. Well, let me tell you both something. John, I want a divorce. I'll have my lawyer contact you. John's eyes widened, but before he could speak, I turned to Sophie. And you, young lady, can forget about me paying for your college tuition. If Alicia is so amazing, maybe she can foot the bill. Sophie's jaw dropped. What? You can't do that. That's my money. I've been counting on it. I want to get into my dream school. You should have thought about that before you stabbed me in the back, I replied, unmoved by her crocodile tears. Mom, please, she sobbed, her cool demeanor crumbling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Please forgive me. I need that money. But her earlier words echoed in my mind. Strict, boring, worse than the other woman. Ignoring their protests, I went upstairs and packed the rest of my belongings. As I came back down, suitcase in hand, John blocked my path. Hannah, let's talk about this rationally, he said, his tone businesslike. The house, our assets. My lawyer will be in touch. I interrupted, pushing past him. I'm done talking to you. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I found a small apartment and threw myself into the logistics of dismantling a 20-year marriage. I hired a lawyer and requested a mediator, determined to handle this divorce as cleanly as possible. The last thing I wanted was a drawn-out, messy court battle. Sophie called incessantly. At first, when I didn't pick up, she resorted to texts, then emails. Each message was a mix of apology and demand. I read each one, my heart breaking anew every time, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself staring at my phone, Sophie's number on the screen. My finger would hover over the call button, a war raging inside me. Part of me yearned to hear her voice, to believe her apologies. But then I'd remember her cruel words, her secret meetings with John and Alicia, and I'd put the phone down. Days turned into weeks. Each meeting with John was a test of endurance conducted in the sterile environment of our lawyers' offices. The man I once loved was now just another face across the conference table. All business and cold efficiency. One day, as I settled into my usual chair, the door opened, and Sophie walked in behind Jan. My heart clenched at the sight of her, but her expression stopped any warm feelings cold. She looked at me with a mixture of condescension and triumph that took my breath away. "Hello, Mother," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you don't mind me joining today." Before I could respond, she continued, "I just wanted to let you know that I won't be needing your pathetic money after all. Alicia has generously offered to pay for my education at any top college in the States." She paused, clearly savoring the moment. "Oh, and I'll be living with Dad and Alicia from now on. We're going to be one big happy family." I felt the eyes of our lawyers and the mediator on me, waiting for my reaction, but I was too tired, too drained to feel much of anything anymore. I simply shrugged. "If that's what you want, Sophie," I said, my voice flat. "I hope you will be happy." Something flickered in her eyes, disappointment. Had she been hoping for a bigger reaction? But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same smug look. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of legal jargon and asset division. In the end, Jan and I split everything down the middle. The house would be sold, with the proceeds divided equally between us. With my share from the house sale and the money I'd saved for Sophie's college fund, I had enough to make a fresh start. I found a small but cozy apartment, and after much soul-searching, decided to take a leap of faith. I quit my job at the clinic and threw myself into creating a business plan for my own cosmetology office. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. All those years of experience, all the dreams I'd put on hold. It was time to put them to use. Weeks of planning, renovating, and nervous anticipation followed, but finally, Hannah's Beauty Haven opened its doors. Those first few months were a whirlwind of long hours, social media marketing blitzes, and the slow but steady growth of my client base. In quiet moments, usually late at night when the day's work was done, I'd find myself scrolling through social media. Sophie's posts would appear on my feed, pictures of her in designer clothes, lounging on Alicia's yacht, always smiling, always looking carefree and happy. Each image was a knife to my heart. I'd wonder if she ever thought of me, if she missed me at all. When her 18th birthday rolled around, I sent her a message wishing her well. Same for her high school graduation. Both went unanswered. A year had passed since the divorce, and life had settled into a new rhythm. My cosmetology office, once just a dream, was now a thriving reality. The steady stream of loyal clients from my clinic days, combined with a growing number of new faces, kept me busier than I'd ever been. I'd even hired 2 assistants to help manage the workload. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, as I was finishing up with a client, my phone buzzed. It was my cousin, Sarah. "Hannah, you won't believe what I just saw," she said, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. I was at the Meadowbrook supermarket, you know, the one on the other side of town, and I swear I saw Sophie working at the checkout. My heart skipped a beat. "Sophie, are you sure?" "Positive." She looked different, thinner, tired, but it was definitely her. I thanked Sarah and hung up, my mind reeling. Sophie working at a supermarket? What about college? What about Alicia's promise to fund her education? That night, after closing the office, I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked up Sophie's social media. What I found shocked me. All her glamorous photos with Jan and Alicia were gone. There were no updates, no college moving pictures, nothing. Her once active profile was a digital ghost town. For days, I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to rush to the supermarket to demand answers, but another part, the part still nursing the wounds of betrayal, held me back. Finally, on my day off, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the Meadowbrook supermarket, my heart pounding as I walked through the automatic doors. And there she was. Sophie, my baby girl, looking so different from the confident young woman who'd sneered at me in the lawyer's office. She was thin, almost gaunt, dark circles under her eyes, as she mechanically scanned items at the checkout. Our eyes met, and I saw a flash of something: embarrassment, shame. Before I could decipher it, she looked away, her cheeks flushing. I approached her checkout, my steps hesitant. "Sophie," I said. She glanced up, then quickly back down at the register. "What do you want?" Her voice was harsh, defensive. "I'd like to talk. Maybe we could get coffee after your shift." "I don't want to talk to you," she snapped, still not meeting my eyes. "Please leave." She finally looked at me, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and something else. Was it fear? Stunned by her vehemence, I backed away. Other customers were starting to stare. With a heavy heart, I left the supermarket, climbing into my car with shaking hands. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of questions. What had happened? Where were Jan and Alicia? Why wasn't Sophie in college? For days after, I waited for a call, a text, anything, but my phone remained stubbornly silent. I thought about going back to the supermarket, but Sophie's words rang in my ears. I don't want to talk to you. Just as I was beginning to lose hope, my phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. With a mix of trepidation and curiosity, I answered. Mom? Sophie's voice, small and uncertain, came through the speaker. Can we meet? We agreed to meet at a small cafe near my office. As I waited, my mind raced with possibilities. When Sophie walked in, my breath caught. She looked so different from the glowing, confident girl in those yacht photos, so much older than her years. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of unsaid words hanging between us. Finally, Sophie spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything. And then, like a dam breaking, the story poured out of her. At first, living with John and Alicia had been a dream. Designer clothes, yacht trips, promises of a bright future. But the honeymoon period didn't last. Alicia started making comments, Sophie said, her eyes fixed on her untouched coffee. Little digs about how much space I took up, how expensive I was. Then she told Dad I couldn't live with them anymore, that there was no money for college. I gasped, but your father surely didn't agree. Sophie's bitter laugh was answer enough. He said I was an adult now, that I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. They kicked me out, Mom. I had nowhere to go. Why didn't you call me? I asked, reaching for her hand across the table. She pulled away, tears in her eyes. I was so ashamed. And then I realized this must be how you felt when we betrayed you. I couldn't face you after that. My heart broke for her, even as a small, petty part of me whispered, good. Now she knows how it feels. I'm sharing a crappy apartment with a coworker, Sophie continued. The supermarket job barely covers rent and food. I feel so useless. I wanted to wrap her in my arms, to tell her everything would be okay, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Sophie, I said gently, I'm so sorry you're going through this. But you're right, you did betray me. Actions have consequences, and this is something you need to work through. We both cried then, mourning the lost year, the broken trust, the pain we'd caused each other. As we parted, something had shifted between us. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a start. That night, I tossed and turned, Sophie's story playing on repeat in my mind. By morning, I made a decision. I called Sophie. I have a proposition for you, I said. I need an administrator at my office. The pay is not great, but it's better than the supermarket. And maybe we can start rebuilding from there. There was a long pause. Then yes, I'd like that. Thank you, Mom. It's been 6 months since that day. Sophie works at my office now, learning the business from the ground up. She's saving for community college, determined to make it on her own merit this time. Our relationship is a work in progress. There are good days and bad days, moments of connection and moments of tension. The trust we once had is slowly, painstakingly being rebuilt, one day at a time. As I watch Sophie greet a client with a warm smile, I feel a glimmer of hope. We're not the same people we were before. The betrayal, the divorce, the year of silence. But maybe, just maybe, we can be something new, something strong.